Just a quick little review for question number 6. We're going to review the factoring aspect. All right. So in this particular case, remember you just had two particular, or not two particular, but you had two sets of parentheses. The only way to make 5x squared is with 5x and x. And now we're going to try 7 and 2 because the factors are 14. So I'll put 7 here and 2 here. Remember, we're looking, that's 7 and that's 10. So that's not going to be 37. So then we're just going to go ahead and switch this out and put the 7 over here. We're going to put the 2 over here. And now we recognize this right here is 35 and this is 2. So to make, you guys are making so much noise. All right. You're going to add them. Right. So those of you guys are not here yesterday, remember this, right? It's just factoring. All right. So now you set them equal to 0. 5x plus 2 equals 0. X plus 7 equals 0. And then we were just supposed to look at this and say, I move the 2 and divide by 5. So x equals -2/5 and x equals -7. All right, does anybody have any questions with the factoring component? Solving quadratics by factoring is in every single math class, no matter where you go. All right, that's how important that is. Anybody have any issues with that? Okay. Did anybody try 8? Does anybody want me to look at 8? You want me to do it? Or are you guys good with it?
Actually, I was hoping you can.
Take a look at it.
Yes,
Let's see what we can do here. So, once again, I always recommend starting with the middle factors of 2x and 3x. Now, 8, the factors of 8 are 2 and 4, 1 and 8. Is it possible to use 2 and 4? No, because there would be a common factor with 2. So I'm just going to do 8 and 1, which forces 8 over here and 1 over here. You see that now, right? So now this would be negative and that would be positive. So we have 2x plus 1 equals 0, 3x minus 8 equals 0. So x equals -1/2 and x equals 8/3. Everybody should be able to go from here to here relatively quickly. All right. So those are the two factoring problems. Anybody have any issues with that now? Well, that's all right. Now let's get to solving by taking the square root. For those of you guys who are not here, what we're doing is we're isolating the square term. All right, we're isolating the square term. So to isolate the square term, I'm subtracting 6. And I end up with 9x squared is equal to 729. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 9. So x squared is equal to 81. And now I need to do what? Take the square root. So x is equal to, now I remember I told you there are how many solutions for a quadratic?
2.
2. So that helped me remember it's not just 9, but it's what? Plus or minus 9. All right, it's plus or minus 9. Okay, give me a minute. A couple more problems, then I'll let you jump in. All right, so now let's go down to, let's say, question number 18. Again, you're just isolating the square term. What I mean by that is you're subtracting and adding 18. So now I end up with 2x squared is equal to 140, what is that, 146? Bless you. Now from there, I have to divide by 2. So x squared equals 73. Now in this case, you're going to take the square root of both sides. Is 73 a perfect square? No. So just x equals plus or minus square root 73. Now, again, this is primarily for the people who are not here yesterday. Do you guys understand that, Mike? You guys who are not here, does that all make sense? Because there's two solutions. If I plug in negative square root 73 and I square it, it'll be 73. Because a negative squared is positive. All right. All right. So now let's get into something a little bit more challenging. Let's take a look at number 22. All right, we still have to isolate the square term. This one's a little bit different because the square term is that quantity. All right, so we should just add 19. So everybody should look at that and say, well, that's just x minus 1 squared equals 100, correct? Everybody's good? Then we're taking the square root. So x minus 1 equals plus or minus 10. Everybody's good with that? And now x, add 1 to both sides, is 1 plus or minus 10. Now we're not going to leave it like that because what's 1 plus 10? And what's 1 minus 10? 1 minus 10, negative 9. So those were my two solutions. Everybody okay with that? People? Not here yesterday, especially. All right, now look at 24 for a quick second. The reason I like this one is because it's not a perfect square. So you're going to add 3. So x plus 2 squared equals 15. Now I need to do what? Square root. So x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 15. Everybody happy with that? Hey, you good with that? And then move the 2 over. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 15. Anybody have any issues with that? Anybody? All right, let's go down to, let's say 30 now. 30 is about as hard as it can get. I subtract 4. 6x plus 3 squared equals 2. And now I have to do what? Not yet. Not yet. That's correct. Take the square root. So now I have 6x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. Is everybody good with that? And then from there, I now have to isolate the x. So I have to subtract 3. So 6x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 2. And then divide everything through by what? 6. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 2 all over what? 6. Everybody's good with that? Yes, sir.
Put x equals plus or minus 2 minus 3.
You mean plus or minus square root of 2?
Yeah, but then I swapped the
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Listen, traditionally we just put the constant before, or we put the rational before the irrational.
Okay.
You hear me? Doesn't matter. No. If you wrote plus or minus square root of 2 minus 3, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right, but just traditionally we put, for whatever reason, the rational number before the irrational.
Oh, I was just gonna say I simplified it, but I don't.
Yeah, no, because listen, if you were to simplify it, I'll show you an example of when we can simplify. If I said this right here was like a 9, now you could simplify by 3. But all 3 whole numbers have to be divisible by the same number, right? The square root of 2 is a radical, okay? So because of that, right, this doesn't matter that it's not divisible. All right, what matters is the number in front has to be, and the number in front is just a what? A 1. So all 3 of these numbers have to be divisible by the same number to reduce them. All right, and how I remember that, I used to write on my paper 4 plus 2 divided by 6. I can't just cross out the 2 and the 6, right? Because that would make it 5 over 3. And we know that's just 1. Okay? So you have to divide all things. All right, now what I'm going to do is, I said I was going to collect these, but I also want to say too, if first, oh, did you have another question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
All right, let's go over 12 for Mr. Capping. All right, so we're gonna add 8. So I have 81 x squared equals 64, right?
Mhm.
X squared equals 64 over 81. And now we're doing what? Taking the square root. So x is equal to plus or minus, square root of 64 is 8, square root of 81 is 9. You with me on that?
I.
I don't know what you mean, kind of.
I'm kind of weird.
You're adding 8, you're isolating the square term.
Just get divided.
Divide by 81. 64 over 81 does not simplify. To take the square root of a fraction, you take the square root of the numerator and then you take the square root of the denominator.
Yeah.
Okay, come on. What?
20.
28, 26. Add 1. X minus 2 squared equals 45. Now we take the square root. X minus 2 equals plus or minus. Now, I'm hoping everybody in here at this time can say 45. We've done it so much, you should be able to look at that and say, what's plus or minus what? 3 radical 5. That's what I'm hoping everybody can do. 9 times 5 is 45, square root of 9 is 3. Now I just move the 2 over. X equals 2 plus or minus 3 radical 5. You with me? All right, now let me say, look, guys, I'm going to give you one more day to finish this up if you didn't do it. And then I'm going to start being a little more harsh with homework. All right, because we don't have many grades. I've got to get grades in. If you don't do your homework, I have to give you a 0. And then that's hard to, that really hurts your grade because we don't have many grades. Is everybody with me? This whole week, I have Friday off. I didn't even know we have, but we also have Monday off, right? So we have 4-day weeks. All right. Then at some point I have to go to the Keys trip. So I'm out for a week. All right. So there's not much going on. All right. Every grade counts. All of this information is important because I'm trying to help you do a great job on your entrance exam. All of this information is on your entrance exam. I don't have time to take a break. All right. You have to learn something every day. All right. And you have to go home and work. All right. I don't want you repeating Algebra 1 next year. All right. I really don't. All right. Some of you might be okay. All right. But most of you it's not. All right. You need to work. All right. So if you didn't finish, you can give it to me tomorrow. Those people weren't here yesterday. You can finish it tonight. All right. If you got it done, I really appreciate your work. And I mean that. If you just work with me, the odds, you won't have to take the notes. So, but hear what I'm saying. So if I can do these 6 problems and you can do them with me, you won't have to write out the notes. You should be able to remember it. All right. Because it's the same procedure every time. All right. So that being said, here we go. Now, part of the reason I also want to show you this because I would never ask you to do something that makes the problem harder. Does that make sense? So like if I was looking at this problem right off the bat, I would just say, I'm not going to solve it by completing the square because I'm just going to factor it. So see if you understand what I mean. Factoring would be a plus 3. Then over here it would be a minus 1. And so I know my answer is -3 and a equals 1. I'm moving on to the next problem. So everybody see that? Right. But I want to show you the procedure that's called factoring or solving the quadratic by completing the square, because that'll help you when you get to problems that you cannot factor. All right. For example, number 3, we can't factor that. So it looks like there's no solution when in fact there are solutions. Okay. So that's what the idea is. So I understand it's easier. And on a test, if I say solve by completing the square and you can do it by factoring, do I care that you're doing it by factoring? No, I don't. All right. I don't care. All right. You're going to be able to solve it however you want. All right. Now, here's how the procedure goes. So please be detailed. And it's going to take, if I were you, I'd write small because it's going to take me some room. So don't write big or you're going to run out of room. All right. So the first step is to move the constant to the other side. So a squared plus 2a, leave a space. and then put equals, and if I move the -3 over, it's going to become what? +3. Thank you very much. All right, now here's the rule for completing the square. All right, here's the rule for completing the square. This, in a quadratic, I want to remind you, is ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the general form for a quadratic. B is the number in front of the x, right? A is the number in front of the x squared, and c is the constant. Is everybody with me? So to complete the square, if you want, you can come right over here and write b divided by 2 squared. That's how you complete the square. So in this problem, what is b? What is b in this case? 2. B is 2. Why is b 2? It's the number in front of the x term, or in this case, a. All right. Now, what's half of 2? 1. What's 1 squared? 1. So off to the side, 2 divided by 2 squared equals 1. That number 1 goes right here, plus 1, plus 1. Now, this now will always factor to a perfect square. It will always factor to whatever the half was. What was the half of 2? 1. Now, I prefer you say +1. So it's going to factor to a plus 1 squared equals 4. Now, if you understood yesterday's work, now you understand today's work, because now all I do is take the what? I take the square root of both sides. All right, so I'm going to take the square root. I take the square root. A plus 1 equals plus or minus what? 2. Then I subtract 1. A equals -1 plus or minus 2. What's -1 plus 2? Bless you. What's -1 plus 2? 1. What's -1 minus 2? -3. Look at my answer here. And look at my answer here. Guess what? Same answer. So why in the world would I do this method over here? I would never do that, ever. All right, if I know it can factor and it's easy to factor, I'm going to go ahead and factor it. But I can assure you, you need completing the square in an advanced math class. That's why I'm showing you. All right, when you get to Algebra 2, pre-calculus, calculus, you might be completing the square. All right, so these are just giving you the basics right now, just the basics. All right, now let's try the next one. Same procedure. First step, move the what? Move the -8. So here we go. A squared minus 2a, leave a space, equals what? 8. What's b? -2 divided by 2 squared. What's that? 1. +1. +1. Now, we're not going to waste any time factoring, because you heard me say it always factors to whatever the half was. What was half of -2? -1. Can't say 1. You got to say -1. So now this factors to a minus 1 squared equals, what's 8 plus 1? 9. Now what do I do? Take the square root. So now a minus 1 equals plus or minus 3. Add 1. A equals 1 plus or minus 3. A equals, help me. A equals 4, or, bless you. I got you, Ryan. 4 or what? Or -2. 4 or -2. Thank you. A equals 4 or -2. Anybody have any questions with that? Anybody? That's the procedure. That is the algorithm to solve that problem. That's the algorithm to solve that problem. All right, now the next problem. All right, it's not going to work. You couldn't factor it to get the answer. All right, so what am I doing first? Adding 22, p squared plus 16p equals 22. Half and square, what's half and square? Say it. 64. Some of you guys now, if you don't know it's 64, then off to the left, you write 16 divided by 2 squared. That's what you're supposed to be doing. If you don't understand, it's b over 2 squared. That's how we came up with a positive 64. Positive 64. It always factors to whatever the half was. What's the half? What kind of 8? Positive. P plus 8 squared equals what? What? 86. Everybody's good with that? Now what do I do? Take the square root. Take the square root. P plus 8 equals plus or minus square root of 86. Can 86 break down? 2 times 43. Both of those are prime. So there is no perfect square in 86. Now all I have to do is move the what? Move the 8. So P equals what? -8 plus or minus the square root of 86. That's how simple. Simple. All right. Couple more to go. All right. Move the 12. Half and square.
16.
Anybody else? What is it? 16. Good. Plus 16. Plus 16. Factors to whatever the half. So what does it factor to? Come on. K plus 4 squared equals 4. Square root. K plus 4 equals plus or minus 2. So far, so good. K equals -4 plus or minus 2. So now you answer the question. K equals -2 and -6. I like to write the -2 first because I like to go -4 plus 2 and then -4 minus 2. All right. Now let me put it on pause and let me see if you can do 5 by yourself. Yeah, it's easy. All right. R squared plus 2R equals 33, right? Completing the square. So what am I adding? Plus 1, plus 1. Factors to what? R plus 1 squared equals 34. Square root. R plus 1 equals plus or minus square root 34. 34 is 2 times 17. Both those are prime, so it doesn't break down. So final answer, R equals -1 plus or minus square root 34. Everybody's good with that? Anybody? Having issues? And you're supposed to be making notes along the way if you get in a little bit of trouble. All right, let me pause number 8, or I'm sorry, number 6, and then I'm calling it a day. All right. Now, this one, everybody should be able to look at and say, I could have factored that, correct? 6 times 8 is 48, the difference is 2. All right, so we know what the answer is. All right, but just because we're gonna do by completing the square, a squared minus 2a equals 48. What's half in square? Plus what? Plus 1, plus 1. Always factors to whatever the half was. What's the half? A minus 1 squared equals 49. A minus 1 equals plus or minus 7. A equals 1 plus or minus 7. A equals, what's 1 plus 7? 1 minus 7. 1 minus, yes, negative 6. It's a good thing we're not recording. All right. With that being said, all right, all I'm asking you now is, that's a procedure. All right, you need to do the odds now, or whatever, the other side, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I looked at them to make sure there was nothing challenging. Look at 11. What do I have to do? Add the what? Add the 48, right? And now just because negative 6 plus 48, then that would just be 42 over there. All right, so don't be confused by that. All right, please now listen. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with work. I'm trying to simplify your life, but you have to do the work. All right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 problems. All right, take care of those 6 problems. And if you didn't get a chance to finish last night's work, finish that. I'm gonna collect both of them tomorrow. Really good job for today, guys.